spend a quick period of time now talking about a quick Kim Jung Gi story. I met him in 2016 in Leeds. He was at the Thought Bubble Festival, and I had imagined that he would be behind barriers and I wouldn't be able to get close to him to talk to him, but he wasn't. I'd shown him, let me show you. I'd shown him, sorry about that bad audio then. I'd shown him these. I had drawn him 3 times. Once painting with a pot of ink, another time painting with an octopus, and a third time with him being the octopus and having a teacup, a saucer, paintbrush, a teapot, and a brush pen in his hand. And anyway, I showed him a picture of those and said I was planning on cutting those out with a jigsaw, because I've done work like that before. That was, I think, predominantly what I was doing at the time, was drawing on pieces of MDF like that, and then cutting it out, and then sanding it all down, and painting it, and putting it in, stringing it for hanging, and putting it into a gallery and selling it. And it used to sell quite good, that type of work, doing characters. But I'd shown him those, and he said, "Why didn't you bring them?" And I had to explain to him, I couldn't believe how easy it was to get to him. I thought there'd be huge crowds, and as I said, barriers and security. I mean, it's Kim Jung Gi, he's a phenomenon. But anyway, so I was sad that I didn't get to give him those, because if I had made them and painted them, I would have given them to him as a gift. Anyway, that was a missed opportunity. I bought his book. He did a drawing inside, which is amazing, and he signed it to me. And he was doing a drawing on the wall at the same time, and it was men on horses and big. It was kind of like English based, I think, with kind of like Queen's Guards. I think they're called. What are they called? Are they beefeaters? The the big fuzzy hats. With those, and his drawing was quite interesting. He made a couple of mistakes and he hid them, and really funny, really interesting type of way of making artwork. And that's how I understand his artwork to be made. It's not how a lot of people understand his work. They think it's flawless and it's perfectly centered and there's no mistakes, and he just has this photographic memory. And he doesn't. He has a great reference of his kind of experience of anatomy and machinery and characters and things. So he's got a great, kind of catalogue to dip into from his experience. But he makes mistakes. He even says that himself in videos, and it's just learning how to hide those mistakes, and that's what I really valued about his work. Anyway, that day when I saw him, there was a guy there, and when I was purchasing the book, it was a German chap who I spoke to, and he was called Jean Christopher, Jean, Jean Christopher, a friend of Kim Jung Gi's. And I got talking to him and asking him about the origins of Kim Jung Gi, because I said that I'd found him on Instagram, but he seems to have come out of nowhere. And he told me the story of Kim Jung Gi, and I'll quickly relay what he told me. Because he got interrupted in the middle because he was so busy. It did start getting busier and busier, and I ended up walking around, purchasing some comic books, coming back and saying to him, "Right, so you were up to this point." What he told me was Kim Jung Gi wasn't well known, wasn't famous really at all for the majority of his career, and he'd been to galleries and publishers, and they weren't interested. They said that his work looked unfinished, because he wouldn't paint it, he wouldn't do the full scenes that he does that he did do in his in the last 10 years or so. Before that, he'd do part drawings, and he wouldn't necessarily complete them. He'd do characters without a background or part of a background, or he'd just decide how much or how little to draw himself, and he'd have that discretion to say, I'm happy to leave it there. and that's my artwork. And others viewed it as not complete, apparently. And Jean-Christophe had said that he had, I don't know if Kim Jung Gi was staying at his house or whether they were staying close by him in Germany, but he'd said that he had boxes and boxes of Kim Jung Gi's artwork just stored in his house, and they were putting it online on his website. And he said that it was artists who started getting interested in Kim Jung Gi. It wasn't an audience, it wasn't galleries, it was artists who saw it and said, this is fantastic, I love the unfinished look, and his style of characters are really good, they're really nice. He seems to have a great sense of how to do light and dark, with the smudging that he'd do with his middle finger. He'd kind of draw and then with his middle finger he'd smudge it in. Or if he used a grey pen as well, or if he watered down the ink, he'd have this lovely coverage of mid-tone along with the light and shadows. And it was artists who'd noticed his work and really appreciated it and started to purchase his work. And before that, he was in relative obscurity. That's what Jean-Christophe had told me, and that's how he started to get popular. And then when he'd put his work on Instagram, he started to blow up. I found him, I hadn't been shown him by anyone. I'd just come across him and loved his work. And I'd sent it to my brother and said, I love this guy. Have you seen how much how he does his work? And it was, I think, as far as I remember, it was him, a time lapse of him drawing in the front page of a book, closing the book, drawing in another one after the other, lots of different characters, different sizes. And my brother liked it. He appreciated it. It was a different artist to get into and appreciate. And then another artist who who'd been to different events and worked with my brother several times, and who I knew, he was into him as well. And my brother had told me he was into him as well, this friend of ours. And he said, apparently he's going to be in Leeds. Would you be interested in going? And I jumped at the chance. And I was working for myself at the time, and I wasn't especially doing that well. I was kind of struggling, just job to job. I've never really been that efficient with my work, and although I've had opportunities, I just haven't necessarily made it click properly yet. So I went there and I purchased more than I could really afford in not only his book but other artists, and I want to show the books that I got there in a video soon, not in a podcast like this but in a standalone video. So I spent a lot of money that I couldn't really afford at the time, but it was an investment in inspiration because I needed to level up really, and that really made me change how I'd work afterwards, and improve upon how I practice my own work. And that was the story that Jean-Christophe told me for Kim Jung Gi anyway, was that he was unknown until that point of artists coming across him and just loving his work, and then it started to just spread around, and he became quite famous really. He did really well and had a great effect on lots of people. Sadly, lost and absolutely sorely missed by so many people. There's a video published by Hyun Jin recently. Absolutely heartbreaking to see him eulogize Kim Jung Gi online and discuss their plans for publishing his unseen artwork. And, just because how much he was there all the time with him. So what a loss for him, and I'm sure lots of others who we don't know. So obviously, my heart goes out to them. I wish I knew them better so that I could offer them some support, but I just posted to them my video that I have of him doing the drawing for me. And just appreciate the fact that I got to meet him. He was really sweet, really nice guy. And I don't know the other people who were there. I know that Hyun Jin was there, and I know that Jean-Christophe was there, but I don't know. There was a couple of women who were there with him as well, and I don't know who they were. But I should, I suppose, have been more curious and asked them at the time. It would have been interesting to know. Either way, that's my Kim Jung Gi story. I've done a couple of tributes to him in my Inktober exhibition submissions. I think it's number 5 because it'll be when they announced it, which was October the 5th. And number 6, I did a weird, almost Kim Jung Gi like image of him as a caterpillar, which was a strange image, but you know, how you process these things is different.